Okay, season 2 of Stranger Things just came out, and I find it really hard not to spoil myself for everything. So I always watch everything spoiled. But as a walk on the wild side, I'm going to try to watch all of this really fast so I don't get spoiled. And after each episode, I will film my reaction. I finished watching the first episode. I guess I'll try to run through some of the plot threads, although it turns out that I've forgotten a lot of the characters' names in the past year, so I'll have to hopefully get them again as I watch this season. At the beginning of the episode, a bunch of people are robbing somewhere in animal masks, and the police are chasing them, and then either the police or the group of people end up in the Upside Down. I think it's the police. And then we find out that one of the people in the group, I think, is a former subject of experimentation, like 11, because we see that she has a tattoo of her birth date. At least I think that's what we were supposed to get. Will is having a lot of trauma, leading to a scene where his brother tries to encourage him, and I don't remember having this experience last time. The brother is one of the characters whose names I absolutely cannot remember, but the brother's acting was so awkward. Anyway, the brother tried to encourage him that it was okay to have PTSD because you don't want to be just like everyone else, do you? I'm different from everyone else. To which Will replied, "Is that why you don't have any friends?" And the brother had to lamely pretend that the reason he's only friends with his brother is just because he really longs to spend all of his time with a kid who has PTSD from being in an alternate dimension and chased by a giant plant. Winona Ryder is dating Sean Austin, but he seems kind of basic, but she seems to really like him. The police chief is secretly living with 11. That was the reveal. Sorry, I'm telling things out of order. There's a new female child character who has really cool hair, but seems like kind of a Mary Sue. Her whole character so far is like all the boys watching her and saying, "I can't believe she skateboards and plays video games and has the boy's name." But I don't know. I'm sure she will be better. They did the whole, I have to say I'm putting my shoes on. I didn't really get the justice for Barb thing. At least I feel like I don't really, I'm not super offended by the fact that a minor character died and it wasn't the plot of the show because they were a minor character. Although, I guess I get where people are coming from about Barb, and that maybe people just really liked the character and the scenes she was in, which is fair, but, I don't know. Anyway, I think they said they were going to address justice for Barb, but if the way they were going to address it was just by having the parents say that they hired a private detective, and then Nancy secretly cries because she knows that Barb is dead, well, if that was that, okay. And then they just showed a lot of pictures of Barb. I liked that scene with Nancy going to cry in the bathroom, though. I also think Steve is turning into a good boyfriend. I liked when he was awkwardly talking about how much he liked the KFC. Those are all the plot things I can think of. Well, let's see. There's a dude who I don't know if he was in the last season. He has a beard. He goes into the police and he tries to tell them about his theories, which are about the Upside Down, but the police don't listen to him. They pretend to think he's dumb, but secretly the police chief actually is living with 11, so I guess he knows everything. Some dude was looking at a bunch of screens and they were all lighting up, and Will keeps going to the Upside Down or imagining that he's going there, and everything is on fire, so I assume this is related. I thought the PTSD doctor that Will was going to, I guess he was sort of a general sci-fi doctor dealing with sci-fi injuries. I liked the part where he was talking about trauma, and I found myself thinking, wow, that's kind of nice. Usually they don't have any kind of positive depiction of any kind of professionals dealing with mental health stuff on TV. I mean, to be fair, a lot of them are not very good in real life, but sometimes they can be good. It's probably good not to have them look like they're all evil. But then I realized that this guy probably is evil. He kept telling Winona Ryder that they could count on him. That's pretty much all I remember. I'll refer to my notes, which are my texts that I sent to Josh. Oh my gosh, it's my celebrity crush, the hench person of indeterminate gender from the Series of Unfortunate Events TV show. That was a great show, by the way. I guess I didn't make any kind of video about it, even just privately for Josh. But I love that show. I forgot how much I love Lucas, and I loved when he said, I have to take a shower from doing real work like a man. I like that Will is being bullied and being called a zombie boy. I guess that's pretty much all of my comments about the episode. I'm looking forward to see what happens in the next episode, and I'm enjoying the show so far. Episode 2. So when the police chief told 11 that they needed to compromise, and 11 was like, compromise? That's me interacting with other people. So it was Halloween, and the kids all went trick-or-treating as the Ghostbusters. It was cute that Lucas didn't want to be the black Ghostbuster and refused to do it. I thought it was perhaps unintentionally meta that Mike really didn't want a girl to be included in the trick-or-treating because he thought that would ruin everything, and he's a fan of Ghostbusters. I really started to enjoy Max in this episode after thinking she was the Mary Sue in the previous one. I think, I don't know, her coolness sort of like goes over the lid of coolness, and she starts to seem somewhat like obnoxious and aggressive. And we also find out that her brother is like abusing her, at least like, I mean, in a somewhat unusual way, I guess, and that he's just extremely cruel to her and scares her. So I mean, I don't think it's actually unusual. I just don't think it's usually how abuse is depicted in like TV shows. I think it's completely unbelievable that somebody who wears double denim could be confident enough to abuse someone. I mean, I don't mean to say that it couldn't happen, but like, why? So I really enjoyed when Max came to Halloween and started really trying to scare the other kids with her mask and stuff. And I think that's when she got to the point where she didn't seem like she was so cool as much as she was just like a very like obnoxious and aggressive kid, which made her seem more real and more likable to me. I really like her vibe with Lucas and Dustin. I want to say something that is not really related to the show, but I think I used to make videos complaining at length about casting of disabled actors and stuff. Basically, I just want to say I really appreciate that when they cast Dustin's actor, they cast somebody who had like a visible disability, and they just wrote it into the show, and it wasn't a big deal. Okay. I don't care for Jonathan and Nancy's relationship. I didn't really mind it in the first season, and that is a lie. I didn't like that he stalked her and took pictures of her, and it felt like we were still supposed to like him and want them to get together just because it was the stereotypical like nerd and popular girl sort of romance. But I wouldn't have complained about it that much. Like, I think the main thing that annoyed me was the idea that we were supposed to see him as put upon when like Steve was upset with him for stalking Nancy. But I wouldn't have minded if they got together. But then when they didn't get together and she was with Steve, I just thought that was so much better. Like, I didn't expect to see a subversion of that, and that it wasn't subverted in some kind of like, oh, poor Jonathan, it's so terrible that Steve has taken the girl away from him. But just that she ended up wanting to be with Steve, and she was with Steve. So to have this season practically start with Nancy like telling Steve that she doesn't love him, and Jonathan heroically carrying her away from the party, I was like, okay, I wouldn't have even cared, but like, you pretended that it wasn't going to happen, so why do you have to just immediately make it happen? We see 11 and the police chief are having some conflict at home because 11 wants to go out and trick-or-treat with the other kids, and obviously basically would like to have some kind of life, but he's not allowing her to do that because he's so overprotective, and she's mad at him. I love watching 11 watch TV, and I really like that when she watches romance movies, she repeats what the girl is saying. In general, I'm a fan of 11's girliness, and I feel like whenever women talk about pop culture, it feels like you're either wanting girls to be girly, or in some sort of backlash about wanting girls to be girly, or in some sort of backlash about the backlash to girls being girly. And it makes me feel frustrated that I feel like I can't talk about this without taking some sort of context into account. I just really love 11. I like that. To me, I don't really see it as a gender thing, and maybe that's impossible to say, but I like the idea that she's like this creepy little kid who has been kind of sequestered away from like a lot of normal things about life, and partly anything that is like many things that are seen as like fun or emotional or unnecessary are things that she wasn't really able to have when she was growing up because she was a test subject and obviously she was being abused and deprived. And so it's like, I guess her focus on, for example, like wanting to be pretty in the first season and like wanting things to be pretty, her almost like I don't know, obsession with these things, just I felt like was just really sweet and also really sad. And I feel that way about her watching romance movies too. Like, I don't know, I just think all those qualities in her are really appealing and lend to the richness of her character or whatever. Josh, I feel like Sean Astin is a little bit like me and Winona Ryder. I mean, I meant the other way around. I feel like Sean Astin is a little bit like you, relating to me, because he keeps sucking up to Winona Ryder and like telling her that everything she does is fine. What else? I realized that Mike being mad that Max was at Halloween was really just a way of subtly showing that he misses 11. Also, they, I think, communicated a little bit on a walkie-talkie. And by the way, the episode ended with Dustin by himself trying to learn how to say tubular in the correct way, which I don't know what that is, and finding a trash can that's making noise, and he opens it and is shocked. And I actually thought the surprise was going to be that 11 was in the trash can, because I thought it would be like, shit, it's probably Barb. I was thinking that it was going to be like in the next episode it would be something less scary because they would be faking us out, but I'm trying to really remember what his expression looked like. I feel like he looked very surprised, like more surprised than if it was just a person like 11, but I don't think he looked upset enough for it to be a dead body, so I'm not really sure what I think. I think it's like a little bit slightly unrealistic that all these kids are like aggressively bullying Will for having been like missing, presumed dead, and now being super traumatized. On the other hand, I feel like any bullying experience that you'll say isn't realistic, somebody will have had, and it's not that I think kids are like not cruel enough to like bully somebody about something like that. I guess it just seems very like, I don't know, just like kind of over the top woobiishness, like that could be related to the way someone is being bullied and why they're being bullied, but I guess it's like, it seems somewhat facile to me to be like, oh, Will has been through all this stuff, he's so traumatized, and look, he's being bullied too. All the other kids are calling him a zombie because he died. All the other kids like come up to him in masks and like intentionally frighten him at Halloween so he has one of his flashback things. I kind of think it would be great if it turned out that he was really just having flashbacks. The reason I think it would be interesting is because I think it would be fun if like they actually thought it was a plot thread, and if everyone and all the kids and everybody were trying to like analyze what it meant, and then at the end it was like, I mean, part of the way through there was like a twist that like Will actually was having flashbacks and they weren't getting any good information from this. What else? I wrote Max as sort of the uber Lucas, because Lucas is mean to Dustin, but then Max is like so much meaner to both of them that Lucas and Dustin are like totally on the same level again. That's all my notes. I wrote, is this show all about nice guys? Even the kids are little nice guys. But I don't think that was fair for me to say. I thought the way Lucas and Dustin like initially were to Max was like, what? But it all worked out cute, and I really like the dynamic that the three of them have. I wrote, does Winona's son, whose name turns out to be Jonathan, have a crush on his own mom? And Josh said that it's okay to have a crush on your own mom if your mom is Winona. And I agree. She's the most beautiful lady. Anyway, I think that's the end of my review of episode 2, so I'll see you again after episode 3, and we'll find out what was in the trash can. So, have you ever dated somebody who has kids, and you didn't know how to relate to their kids, and you were really awkward? Well, don't worry, because you can't possibly do as bad a job being a substitute mom or dad as Sean Astin did in this episode. where he was trying to relate to Will, so he compared Will's PTSD to his childhood experience being afraid of clowns, which was not only insensitive, but unrealistically, instead of saying, like, I can't believe that you would say something so insensitive, Will actually was into it. And then when seeing a giant slug made him go into the upside down, he just was like, go away, I'm not afraid of you, because that's what Sean Astin did about the clown. And so then surreal things happened. A bunch of strange lights started going up to him, and it was like, there was music playing. I don't really remember the music. Mostly this episode is about Dustin's love affair with the slug that he finds. And he names it after that guy from the Three Musketeers, but I don't know how to pronounce his name. Anyway, the slug seems really sinister and evil, but God bless Dustin. He's just like, he loves me. And, like, meanwhile, the slug just, like, looks completely evil and, like, it wants to kill everyone. And Dustin's like, we can't do anything bad to the slug. We're friends. He trusts me. Dustin takes his large turtle, much larger than the slug at that point, out of its terrarium, and he puts the slug in there as if the turtle was not even important anymore. So that's basically what happens. I think doing these videos after the episodes is good. I feel like normally I would not be able to remember, like, what happened in which episode, because I just usually kind of marathon things and just watch them whenever I watch them. So, Nancy doesn't remember what happened at the party, really, and she thinks that she and Steve are still dating and stuff, and so he's really mad that Jonathan took her home, but Jonathan says that, like, Steve told him to do it and it's no big deal, and he, like, sticks up for Steve, which I like. It feeds into what I had hoped, which was that Jonathan would just be supportive of Nancy and Steve's relationship and it wouldn't be weird. So that happens. What else happens? 11 sneaks out, and we're given some flashbacks of when the police chief first took 11 in and how she was slowly opening up to him, but now at this point she's really annoyed when he's told her things like never open the curtains, like don't talk to anyone, like, you know, don't go outside or anything. So she started to do all of those things. There's a weird flashback to when he starts talking to her about his dead mother, and he just goes on and on. Anyway, 11 sneaks into the school at the end of the episode. She met a mother and child, and the mother perceived 11, I thought, as, like, a much younger child than she actually is, which I thought was a little weird. Like, I feel like 11 is old enough that people would find her behavior to be disconcerting and somewhat threatening, not like she's in need of help, you know what I mean? I'm trying to remember how this was handled in the previous season when she was wandering around in the grocery store and stuff. Anyway, 11 is given directions to the school, and forgive me, but I don't understand how 11 is Russian or why she's referred to as Russian. Did they just find out that she was, like, of Russian parentage? Because I don't understand how she's Russian, or if that's just, like, something that they think incorrectly. Anyway, she goes to the school and she's looking for Mike, but actually Mike was having a fight with Max right then because Max demands to know why Mike is so mean to her and doesn't want her into the friend group, and he eventually has to admit that it's because they used to be friends with a different girl and she's gone and Mike misses her, and a group of friends can only have one girl. So meanwhile, 11 sneaks up and she sees Mike talking to a girl, and I didn't really like this, but she's jealous and she makes Max, like, fall. I'm perfectly happy to see 11 doing creepy, weird, and violent things to other people, but I didn't really enjoy the, like, girl rivalry thing. You know. What else happened? Let me refer to my notes. Oh. It was really... Oh, okay, so it is confirmed that Will's flashbacks are actually real in some way, because Joyce starts watching the video of him being bullied at Halloween, and it turns out that he sits down and he's starting to have a flashback, and it looks like there's just something wrong with the film or something, but, like, the shape starts flashing across the screen, and Joyce reasonably traces it, and it looks a lot like the thing he draws, which is what he sees. However, like, I guess the thing about Joyce as a character, which almost sort of becomes the aesthetic of the whole show, because I think Joyce is kind of the most iconic character in the show, it's that she's always doing completely reasonable things, but she does them in a way that makes them look ridiculous. So she like runs to grab some tracing paper, and just the way that she grabs it, she looks ridiculous. And then she grabs crayons, and I guess crayons probably are better than using like a pen or pencil, because like you could mess up the tracing paper, and she's drawing on the TV. Like, you don't want to damage the TV. I like Joyce thinking that the video camera tape was like a normal videotape that had just shrunk in some accident. But, yeah, so she runs and gets the crayons, and she just could barely pick up the crayons. She was so anxious, and then she was tracing, but like she was like, I don't know how to trace things. Anyway, it was a smart thing to do, and she eventually concluded that, Will was seeing or experiencing something that in fact was real. Or, real on some level besides just like a traumatic flashback. Also, Nancy decides that she wants to tell Barb's parents what happened. And she knows that she can't tell them on the phone, but she decides to call them and tell them that she wants to tell them, but she can't tell them on the phone, so she's going to meet them somewhere. Obviously, the government is listening, and why didn't she just do the whole thing in person? I was actually like, I think at the point that she does tell them that Barb is dead, I'm probably not going to be able to watch it. I hate watching that kind of scene, so I will probably kind of turn it down and turn away from the screen, and I won't be able to summarize it very well, because I imagine that Barb's parents will probably think Nancy is like a bad person, and they'll get really angry and upset at her or whatever, and I just can't really deal with that. That really stresses me out. Anyway, I think that's pretty much everything that happened in the episode. Yeah, it was pretty much just Dustin's love affair with the slug that he just thought was so special and like didn't realize was a monster from another dimension. Even though the slug completely traumatized Will and made him have a not really flashback, Dustin just really wants to cuddle with it. Okay, I'm cleaning my room and I'm extremely tired of doing that, and my brain is mush, so I'm sorry if this isn't a great reaction video. This is my reaction to episode 4. It turns out that Dustin's little creature that he really liked but that was obviously dangerous is indeed dangerous. It's turning into a littler version of the same monster that was bothering everybody in the first season, and it ate his cat or something. I didn't really feel like this storyline worked, although I suppose I could still be converted if it turns out that Dustin is under mind control or something, but it just seems kind of dumb to be like, oh, Dustin found this creature. It's obviously dangerous, but Dustin loves it. All the kids say it's dangerous, but Dustin loves it. All the kids say that they need to take it and look at it because it's obviously dangerous, but Dustin loves it and secretly hides it. It's dangerous. Like, I don't know, it just feels like the whole time it stays, you know what I mean? It's like the viewer's reaction stays on the exact same keel for the whole time. Like, I guess I just felt like it would have been more fulfilling to watch if, like, Dustin was actually right or something, but instead it's like you just spend so much time watching Dustin, like, love the little monster that's, like, obviously evil, and it's like, okay, we get it. Speaking of characters who I usually like but are not working for me right now, well, I guess it's not working. I guess I think they did a good job showing how Hopper becomes like a horrible and basically abusive parent to Eleven and just treats her horribly and doesn't really seem to understand that she's just a child and she wants to have normal things in her life, and even like takes away her TV, which is like the only contact that she has with the outside world, and is almost like her social life because he's the only person in her life. Which is interesting because he has a daughter who dies, right? So I guess they're trying to make some kind of point about that, how he's becoming like very overprotective and totally cruel to her because he just doesn't want something to happen to another daughter of his. Speaking of characters that I never liked and now really don't like, I'm really tired of Will. I know that his role in this show is basically just to suffer and be, in peril, but like, I just find him very boring and undynamic as a character. Joyce I'll also complain about slightly, although I guess I've always felt this way about Joyce. Like, Winona is Winona, so I love her. And I love the way that Joyce is always manically doing arts and crafts and just doing everything in a dramatic and unhinged type of way. But I guess it's just like the fact that like all of her motivations come from being a mother and in a way that just doesn't feel very complex, I guess. Like, I'm not really sure. I feel like I guess I'm never really sure what we're supposed to make of her. Oh, I don't like to talk about things in these videos that I haven't thought out a bit because I'm going to be inarticulate in describing this. I guess I just feel like her way of expressing herself with Will, which I think we're supposed to just take as she's a really good mom, ends up being like very one note and kind of babying him and sort of spoiling him. And I mean, at the same time, we don't really see their relationship before, so we don't know like how much of this is just like a reaction to what's happened. But it doesn't even come off like necessarily like we're supposed to be, oh, she's like spoiling him or she's sort of treating him like a baby and it's maybe not so good. But that we're just supposed to think that like, okay, this is how a really good mom acts. And I'm not saying that she's like being a bad mom or something. I just feel like the character just kind of feels like one note because of that, I guess, you know? What else happened in the episode? Well, Max was kind of fighting with the kids again about how she felt like they didn't want to include her. Oh, well, I was mistaken. Nancy and Jonathan made a good decision. They got taken to the lab or whatever because everybody was listening to them on the phone and they heard that they were going to tell Barb's parents. So they took them to the lab and they gave them a talk about how they couldn't tell anybody that Barb was dead. But Nancy secretly recorded them, so now she has a recording of them saying that Barb is dead that she can show to Barb's parents. I hope it doesn't happen in a really overdramatic way where she's like, let me play you this recording that will tell you where Barb is, and like the parents are like hopefully listening and then it's like Barb is dead. But I do wonder how Nancy and Jonathan knew that nobody put a bug on their car and was listening to their car, but I still thought it was a cool moment when they got in the car and Nancy turned on the walkie-talkie or whatever it was, a tape recorder? I was born in 1988. I have no excuse for being so confused by like 80s technology. Anyway, that was very smart, Nancy and Jonathan, despite my slight complaint about it. As usual, Max's brother is being super abusive and scary to her, and he told her that he doesn't want her to be friends with her friends anymore. Yeah, I love Max a lot. I feel like, despite my initial complaint about her being a Mary Sue, I like her more and more. And I also see how, like, her initial coldness toward the boys wasn't necessarily so much her just being, like, cool or something, but actually because her brother has made it very scary for her to have friends or be close to anyone. I feel like I'm missing something else about the episode. Oh, right. 11 looks at a picture of her mom and she gives herself sensory deprivation by putting on a blindfold so that she can try to talk to her mom in an alternate plane. I wasn't totally clear on what happened. Like, was she really talking to her mom and her mom disappeared? Then Hopper comes home and he finds like a deep pit and he doesn't know what's up with that. I don't know if it goes to the upside down or if 11 like escaped through it or both, I guess. Oh, see, this is why I should have planned this before the video. I assume it has to do with those vines that are growing from the upside down that are going to attack everyone. I think that's about all I have to say. Hopper is becoming really evil, but in a way that I think is believable. I don't love the storyline about Dustin being so dumb that he unleashes this monster on the world. Nancy and Jonathan's plan was smart, even though somebody could be recording their car. I love Max. I wish that Will would do something other than cry because it just makes it a little bit hard to care about him, I guess. And I think there's also just the fact that, like, I mean, I know back in the day maybe those were normal haircuts, but it makes it hard to differentiate Will and Mike because, like, they both have such outlandishly bad haircuts by modern day standards that, like, I just think of Will as, like, the less good Mike. Overall, I think I just really miss, Mike's prominence in the show that he had in the first season, and the fact that instead I have to engage with Will. I'm dialing it up a little bit. I don't really hate Will, I just wish that he was more interesting. Episode 5. A lot of things happen in this episode. I'll start with the most boring part. Hopper went underground and he was in a tunnel and he was walking around a lot. And he kept lighting a lighter. And finally a bunch of vines came and all were choking him and stuff while he yelled from under the ground. Meanwhile, Will was like really sick at home and he was drawing all of his drawings and stuff. So Joyce put them up on the wall and they realized, I don't even know. So Sean Astin came over, and since he doesn't know about sci-fi world, he was trying to give them like good advice. Like, first of all, he tried to bring over some Rubik's Cubes or whatever because that's what he liked when he was a kid. I think like Sean Astin needs to realize that like his childhood was like somewhat different from Will's childhood because he was never kidnapped by a giant plant. But he doesn't seem to realize that. Anyway, Joyce decides that because Sean Astin is good at brain teasers, he can solve Will's drawings. And at first he comes in and sits down with Joyce and starts to have a reasonable conversation where he's like, are you and Will okay? Why are you guys doing this? But then suddenly he's like, oh, I love puzzles. I will solve this puzzle. Well, I was thinking about, like, the moment in, like, a sci-fi or fantasy story when the character accepts that, like, the sci-fi or fantasy elements are real. It always interested me when I was a kid, I think because I really wanted those type of things to be real. So, like, to me, I was often, like, thinking, like, okay, like, is today going to be the day when something happens and I realize that, like, Narnia is real or something? And, like, I think for me, I always imagined it must be like a huge, paradigm shift in your life to like realize that these things are real. Like, I feel like if something like that happened to me, I wouldn't even be participating in the adventure. I would just be like, it's really happening, finally. But I think like, it ends up being glossed over, and that's probably for a good reason, which I think is that like, it's within the range of like, accepted normal behavior for people to believe in ghosts or like being psychic or something like that. But if it's like something really, really extreme like this, and especially if it makes you like act in a way that's really out of the norm, like Will's family is doing, like I think it would be quite hard for like a normal person like Sean to just like cross over into accepting that. Sorry for going on a ramble, I just woke up. I thought it was interesting because Sean and Max both have they both make their transition into like participating in this stuff in this episode. So I thought that they kind of glossed over it with him by just making him be into the puzzle and somewhat unbelievably just stopped noticing the fact that like he was worried about everybody's behavior before. Anyway, they use the puzzle and they drive around and Will is somehow getting messages from Hopper or maybe from some kind of like monster. I don't really understand. He calls them now memories, which means they're not memories. But anyway, they finally find Hopper in a tunnel, and they go down and find him, and he's being choked by vines right then, and they save him. And then they turn around, and there's like a hazmat suit guy, like, shooting all the vines with like a crazy gas that kills them. But because Will is full of the vines, he lies down on the ground and starts having a fake-looking seizure. The end. Some of the other things that happen in this episode are Dustin has a terrible life and I'm now completely sympathetic toward him again. Like, first of all, he loves his mom so much and they constantly tell each other that they love each other. And Dustin, like, fakes a phone call making it look like their cat was lost but has been seen walking around when actually their cat was eaten by his own monster pet. Then Dustin puts on his, like, hockey outfit or whatever to protect himself from the monster. It's basically like Troy trying to protect himself from the zombies in Community by wearing the like Predator outfit. Like, I don't think it would be very effective. But anyway, also he's calling Lucas and telling him to come over, which really scared me because Dustin goes and he's in like the shack and he's looking out through the slats and he's put these like pieces of meat on the ground and like the monster's like walking along and eating them. So I totally thought that like as Dustin was watching, Lucas would just show up at his house and just be eaten right in front of him. But that didn't happen. Dustin successfully puts the monster in the one of those cool cellars that have those cool doors on top of them. He traps it. For the rest of the episode, all he does is like be really confident around the house cleaning up the cat blood and trying to call his friends, and like none of his friends answer. And it's kind of a cool idea to have the walkie-talkies in the show, I guess, given when it's set. There weren't any cell phones or anything, but it kind of sidesteps that. I don't know what I'm talking about. I wasn't like that age in the 80s, so maybe it like was normal to use walkie-talkies that much if you were that type of kid, but I don't know. Anyway, he spends all his time trying to call the other kids, and they're not there. Sorry, this is a bit sleepy. I just woke up, obviously. So he's trying to call the other kids, they're not there. Meanwhile, Lucas really wants Max to like not be mad at him anymore for the fact that Mike wasn't including her in the Dungeons and Dragons game. And so he asks his parents, and his dad gives him a sexist response about how you should just always buy presents for a woman even if they're wrong. Anyway, then he goes because he knows that Max is going to be at the arcade. He gets my celebrity crush, the hench person of indeterminate gender, who admittedly is a lot less cute in this show than he was in Series of Unfortunate Events, wearing a nurse dress, to trick Max into going into the back room by pretending that a game is out of order. And then Lucas tells her the whole plot of the story, and Max doesn't believe him. And then she goes back to play the game. And Lucas tries to tell her friends don't lie, which is the thing that the characters always dramatically say to each other. And she grabs the out of order sign that was stuck to the game, and she's like, oh, like, he only lied about a game. But anyway, then she starts yelling about all the sci-fi secrets and stuff. So he like puts his hand over her mouth. And honestly, like, my feeling was, given that she's being abused by her brother, I thought that she would have a really negative reaction to somebody like grabbing her in an attempt to control her behavior. But she didn't. Instead, she was like, oh, now I believe you because you put your hand over my mouth. What else happened? I'm sorry. Nancy and Jonathan went to this guy, the guy with the beard, and he was drinking vodka. And he told them all his theories about how Barb died, and they were like, actually, this is what happened. And they played him the tape and everything. And he was like, well, he was saying that, like, people won't believe the tape because it's too outlandish, so what they have to do is, like, come up with a story that's, like, basically the same story but less crazy sounding, like, making it sound like the same company actually was responsible for Barb's death, but in, like, a less ridiculous way, like, she was exposed to harmful toxins. I guess it's not the worst idea, but I also feel like it could just blow up in their face if they, like, make up a story that isn't real. Like, I feel like they could just get caught in the details of their, like, made-up, emotionally true, but factually false story. I'll look at my notes. Oh, yeah, okay. You're like a super spy. The episode starts with Mike telling Will that because of his powers and the fact that he can, like, see into the evil's mind or whatever, he's like a super spy. Nothing would be more satisfying than if Will just responded to one of these comments from Sean Astin or Mike by saying, "Why are you making light of my problems like this?" Episode 6. If it wasn't bad enough that Jonathan and Nancy are getting together, the bearded man is a fangirl, and he corners them and tells them his headcanons about them. He's like, Nancy, you're not getting together with Jonathan. You just ran away to, what's his name? Oh, Steve. And he's like, Jonathan, you're not with Nancy because you have issues with your dad, which I feel like would be a better piece of armchair psychoanalyst if the person that Jonathan wasn't dating was like a man. Like, Jonathan, you're not dating Steve even though you really like him because he reminds you of your dad. But anyway, all his headcanons are treated as being spot on as he like provides all this exposition about people that he doesn't actually know just based on observing their body language because he's such a genius. And then Nancy and Jonathan both go and they sit in their respective beds and they argue with him out loud. I don't have issues with my dad. And then like they both get up and they have sex with each other or they make out. I wasn't really watching by this point. Well, you know how I feel about this pairing. I wouldn't have cared if it had just happened, but for some reason, the fact that, like, I thought they were going to subvert it and Nancy was just going to happen to choose to be with another guy, it was just a little trick. It was just a little bump on the road to Nancy and Jonathan getting together. And for some reason, because of that, their pairing bothers me so much when I wouldn't even care about it otherwise. So I totally missed a major plot point that happened in the last episode, by which I mean I didn't mention it when I was describing the episode. 11 finds the house where her aunt and her mom live. The backstory of 11's mom, which I had kind of forgotten, was I think her biological dad is the awful guy that was sort of raising her and acting as her dad. And her biological mom was a lady who was signed up for experimentation or something, I think. But, yeah, basically her mom gave birth, the baby was taken away from her, and she was told that it was killed, but she knew that she wasn't. So she goes and tries to start shooting everybody up in the lab and finding 11, but instead they give her so many electric shocks to her brain that for the rest of her life she just sits in an armchair rocking back and forth, which is kind of but I feel because the show is such a pastiche, I'm not sure I can really fault it for doing that exact same depiction of a crazy brain damaged character rocking back and forth in a rocking chair and saying things, because that's what they do in this kind of story, I guess. So I guess it was a somewhat interesting reveal when 11 goes into her mom's head and figures out that the words that her mom is always saying, which her sister had taken to hopefully be positive words, are actually just words that adhere to the horrible story that she's always remembering over and over, which is her experience of having a kid, trying to find her kid, shooting some people, and being given a huge amount of electric shocks to the brain. Anyway, 11's aunt says that 11 can stay with her, so 11 says okay, and 11's aunt says eventually you have to tell me what's going on with you and what happened, and 11 says okay, but I don't know if that's really going to happen. But also her aunt said you can tell me when you're ready, so I feel 11 can just take advantage of that and be I'm not ready yet every day. So Dustin had to go to Steve because nobody else showed up to help him with his horrible monster pet. So there's a nice scene, I guess, which kind of made me worried Steve was going to die, because Steve has just become such a charming character. But there's a nice scene where they're walking on railroad tracks and Steve starts giving Dustin advice on girls, which is really stupid, given Steve's situation. So Steve keeps telling Dustin that you should pretend you don't care about girls, and Dustin is oh, is that what you do with Nancy? And Steve is no. And then Steve explains how he does his hair. I really enjoy Steve, and I hope to be like Steve someday. I like how whenever he enters a room, actually that is kind of what I do in these videos, I just constantly adjust my hair. I'm already Steve. I really like Lucas's sister. She's one of my favorite new characters. I like how she was sitting in his room making his action figures kiss, and Lucas got upset because the action figures were from 2 different canons. Wow, is that everything that I wrote? I feel I must have missed a lot of the things that happened. Oh, right, okay, the main plot, which was boring because it was about Will. I'm sorry, I feel Will just isn't likable enough to have this plot. Basically, Will lies in a bed looking miserable, and everyone figures out that when they ever shock the vines or the monsters or whatever, Will is in horrible pain and being injured and getting brain damage. And he's already gotten some brain damage and he doesn't even remember his mom's boyfriend, Sean Austin, who is named Bob, by the way. And he remembers Mike, which is nice, but he's just you're my friend, Mike. So anyway, Will doesn't remember very much, and the scientists are secretly saying to each other that actually, Will is probably just going to, die within the day because, he's getting so much brain damage and, forgetting so much stuff, but they're just whatever. And so they, talk to him and they try to figure out where the vines and stuff are, and they're gonna go fight the vines, I think. This just bores me so much. Anyway, as they go and do this, Will starts crying and he's I'm so sorry. And it's obviously the monster or whatever that was mentally communing with Will has forced Will to send in all of these guys, and they're going to be killed by the vines. So for some reason they made Will do something so morally ambiguous when Will just isn't even likable enough for you to feel that sympathetic. For example, I feel very sympathetic toward Dustin and the fact, even though he caused a huge problem by raising this monster just because he thought that it was cute and that it loved him, but
I don't know, I feel like because Dustin is such a dynamic character, like, he's really likable and I'm totally on board. But, like, even though I complain about it a little. But you know what I mean. I still like Dustin. And I can appreciate, I guess, that he did this and that it's actually a lovable flaw of his that caused him to not realize that this thing was a monster until it literally ate his cat. But like with Will, it's like I feel like his whole personality is just to suffer and be taken care of by the other characters. So like now that he's like, I'm sorry I sent all of these men to their deaths. The monster in my head just like forced me to do it or whatever. It's like, oh shut up. Am I supposed to be sympathetic toward you? Um so anyway, Will is like, I'm so sorry. And like, even though the viewer immediately understands what he meant and like Mike understands what he meant, like Mike goes running to like tell the dudes not to go into the place where they're going to be attacked by the vines or the monsters or whatever. Like I said, I couldn't see any of this. Did I say this? That the show is so visually dark that I can't see what any of the scary reveals are supposed to be because they always happen in like a really dark setting and like the monster or whatever is always really dark colored as well and like I can't see what's happening and like the monster is like attacking someone or doing something scary and then all the characters are reacting and they're like upset and I'm like I can't see what's happening in the show. Why are they so upset? Anyway, something scary happened and like Mike was running to the guards and he was like, stop, I figured out that you guys shouldn't do it, it's a trap. And they all ignored him even though it should have been obvious to like anyone what Will was saying. And then Joyce was like, Will, what are you saying? You have to explain. What do you mean? What can you possibly mean by saying, oh, I'm so sorry that the monster made me send all of these people to their deaths? So anyway, the monster made him send all of these people to their deaths. I will see you again in episode 7.
Episode 7. This episode was exactly like every story that I ever liked to write when I was 12. It's all about Eleven's cool punk sister who has psychic powers, and she runs a crime family of teenage punks who all live in an alleyway, constantly show off how punk they are by ragging on Eleven with various pop culture references related to the fact that they see her as a farm girl because she's wearing a plaid jacket. And the sister basically takes all these people and organizes them to go around and just kill anybody who ever wronged them. So I guess I had missed the point of Eleven's mom's memory that Eleven was seeing. What she's trying to show Eleven is that when she saw her in the lab, Eleven was playing with another little kid who also had psychic powers, and that is this girl, who Eleven immediately goes off and tries to find. Eleven's aunt, I think, tries to call Hopper. I didn't totally follow what happened. I wasn't, like, initially I thought it was like, oh, she's like a double agent. Eleven can't trust her. She's trying to turn Eleven into the bad guys or something. But, I spoke too soon. I think she was trying to help, but was just, like, a little bit clueless, and Eleven immediately steals some of her money and stuff and just like leaves and rides a bus, which was cool. I love buses. So yeah, then Eleven is in Chicago and she meets the cool punk crime family. So this was quite a departure from how the episodes usually are. I mean, you could easily criticize it, I guess. It's a bit distinctive, like how many different characters and subplots there are in Stranger Things. And I think it really shows that the show was like made for Netflix and like made to be released all at once, because like, for example, if I wasn't marathoning this show, I'm sure that I would not remember that the sister character was introduced in the first scene of the season. Like if I was watching an episode every week, then I would have no idea who she was. And I think also the fact that there's so many like little plot threads like really works well for marathoning. Like I think it would be difficult to try to remember what happened to the characters last time if like there was a lot of time going by since you saw them, you know? Anyway, so the show typically has a lot of subplots and plot threads, but this was pretty much just a contained episode following Eleven as she goes and finds her sister and meets the crime family. I guess I liked the sort of ambiguity of how the sister was portrayed. Like, I don't know, she sort of comes across, you know, she tells Eleven that, like, she loves her and she feels so complete now that they found each other and, like, this group will be her home.
Eleven has to stop like rolling over for anybody who uses the word home in any context. I'm sorry. I mean, I know that's 11. But anyway, so she says this to 11, and then when she's talking to the other kids, you do get the idea that she sort of wants to like use 11 for her powers in order to sort of like do her missions and stuff like that. But at the same time, like, you get that while a lot of the things they do are kind of questionable, criminal, and possibly evil, they are they believe in what they're doing. And I think the sister like honestly thinks that like this is the right thing for 11 to be doing, and that like it will be better for 11 if she gets into it. You know, I think something that was really good in this season, I like how there's I kind of see a parallel between the sister and Hopper. Like how they both want to help 11. They're not like the guy who raised her, but how they both ultimately fail her and sometimes treat her in an abusive way because of their ideas about like what taking care of her or helping her means. Good job, show. So anyway, the episode kind of follows how 11 gets given a makeover to be more punk, and sort of briefly joins the other kids, but she starts to have like visions where she realizes that Hopper misses her and that Hopper's in trouble and Mike's in trouble, and she wants to go and help her friends, which is cool. I'm really excited for how this season is going to end. I'm sure 11 is going to do something great, but basically then a bunch of like villains, I don't remember exactly who they are, come in and start trying to like attack the little punk kids in the crime family. So the kids escape, and 11 at the last moment decides not to escape with them, but to go back and help all of her friends. I love this show so much. And I guess I was hit with this yet again during the scene where Joyce and Jonathan and Mike were telling Will all about their memories of him to try and sort of bring him back because he's possessed or whatever. And like, first of all, it was funny that Joyce and Jonathan's memories were actually cool, and Mike's memory was literally like, I asked you to be friends with me because neither of us had any friends, and you said yes because you don't have any friends. But I felt really tense because I felt like at this point it's like such a subverted trope that it's become a trope to have a scene where characters like friends and family are trying to talk to them and like bring them over to the right side when they're possessed or going evil or something, and then like, you know, they'll have the music swelling and they'll try to like fake the audience out that it's really working to bring the person over, and then like they'll just have like a horrible moment that like shows you that the person is still evil. I got tense about this, and then I realized I was watching Stranger Things, and like as I thought about how like sincere and like sweet the show is, I just totally relaxed, and I knew that they would like not try to screw with my feelings by doing that, and they didn't. Good job, Will, doing the Morse code. One of the only cool things that you've done this season. I'm sorry. I liked the callback to Should I Stay or Should I Go? Demodogs is cute. It's kind of weird that Dustin has now become a fangirl like that other guy, and he's like, Lucas, I could feel the electricity between you and Max. I saw that you two were holding hands. Like, I guess Dustin's just gonna grow up to be another person who wants to like run around shipping real people in his life and telling them why they should be together. A side note, although I'm not sure if it was in this episode, and it's been in previous episodes, I guess, I think they've tried to explain Max's relationship with her brother, who's actually her stepbrother, and I don't really understand what's going on, I guess. Apparently he's acting really abusive and threatening to her and trying to keep her from having friends because their parents got married to each other and they moved. I was a little confused, I guess, given like how intensely abusive of her he's seen when he first appeared. I don't fully get it, but maybe I just need to like think about it again. Also, I've sort of been avoiding like other people's discussion of the show, which I would usually be reading a lot of when I watch a TV show, so maybe somebody else just like picked up something that I didn't really understand about the characters. I thought it was kind of like when Joyce asked Will if he knew who she was. I wasn't convinced that he actually knew who she was. Like, I feel like if you're a little boy and a lady is talking to you really intensely, like, you can just say mom. Like, that's kind of a freebie. It's probably your mom. So Sean Astin died heroically, which was
One of the only things about the show that I was spoiled for, it was one of two things that I accidentally spoiled myself for and then decided to watch the show because I realized I wouldn't be able to keep from spoiling myself about other things. Anyway, yeah, he died in a sweet moment, and still apparently with no knowledge that he caused all the events of the season by trying to give Will advice on dealing with like a monster from another dimension based on his own experience talking to an imaginary clown. Everything got really edgy and grimdark, and they all shut themselves up in that shed, and everybody has guns. And for some reason, Lucas used the phrase Judgment Day, I think. I kept rewinding because I couldn't believe that that was actually what he said. But yeah, Max was like, what's going to happen? And Lucas was like, Judgment Day. The little actor playing Will is doing a really good job. I also wrote down that he was reminding me of Nicolas Cage in The Wicker Man when he was possessed, but that's a really mean thing to say, especially given that, like, I'm saying he's doing a good job. It somehow was like that, but good. Maybe the demon that's possessing him, like, is Nicolas Cage. It was a little bit funny after Sean Astin died when they were trying to have, like, a deep scene about it, and they were playing like the type of music they always play on the show just to do like the vibe of the show, and it was like too funny. It was like wah 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 wah, and then Mike was like, guys, did you know that Bob founded his own electronics store? Isn't that cool? And they all had a moment of silence thinking about that. I think that's about it. 11 came back at the end and it was really badass, and she's got her eyeliner on, so I guess the point of all of 11's adventures was for her to get tough and have a cool new look from the punk street game that she was very briefly in. I think that's about everything. It's a little, I think they did a good job by, like, lampposting the fact that, like, it's sort of ridiculous that the demon can figure out where they are from hearing a phone ring. Like, it's a demon. I'm sure it can do whatever. Like, sure, that's fine. So I think, like, the fact that they kind of lampposted it and we're like, I don't see how it could possibly know because of that. And then, like, it does. Basically works. Sure, whatever. Tomorrow I'm going to watch the last episode and I'm really excited to see what everybody does. Well, it's the best night of the year, so I just really hope there aren't any girls around ruining it. Except for you, Lady Rainicorn. You're the only girl who's allowed in my eternal empire. I felt that when Hopper was telling 11 about his daughter's death, it sounded as if he was confessing to killing her. Like, we know what happened, but 11 doesn't, and she's extremely literal. So, like, the fact that he was like, there's a black hole inside of me, and my daughter is gone, sucked up by the black hole. Like, if I was 11, I would be nervous. Anyway, that dude ended up... Well, Hopper was like, please make it so 11 can have a normal life and not have to stay inside all the time. And then the guy was like, oh, here, I faked a birth certificate saying 11 is your daughter, but she still has to stay inside for a year. Okay, I mean, I guess a year is better than indefinitely, but it's not a great solution. And then meanwhile, they make an exception that the only time 11 is allowed to go outside is to go to the, like, school winter prom, which doesn't really make sense because it's, like, a very public event. Like, I feel like when you think about the equivalent of, like, 11 going over to her friends' houses and, like, quietly playing with them, or even 11, like, I don't know, going to a restaurant with her friends or something like that, like, going to a prom where there's, like, a ton of people there seems like the equivalent of, like, 20 excursions that are more, you know, subtle. So that seemed kind of like a bad idea if they're trying to keep her under wraps. Also, Hopper's a bad dad because he didn't show 11 how to dance at all, and she showed up at a dance so nervous about dancing that when a boy asked her to dance, she was confused. I have to say that I liked Wendy dancing with Dustin, and I feel like if it happened, like, with any other character, I would be annoyed, but, like, with Dustin, I'm totally like, yeah, like, I can't believe those girls don't appreciate Dustin. He's such a nice guy. I like how Dustin's affair with the Demodog lasted until the very end. Since I've already decided the show isn't going to mess with my emotions in a certain way, you know, I guess in what's probably a more, like, modern day type way.
But at the same time, I still kind of felt like the Demodog was going to jump up and eat Dustin's face. I'm glad that didn't happen, and I think maybe I'll end up feeling like thematically it sort of gave it a good note to give him like a final moment being cute with his Demodog, because I think like it's just part of the story that Dustin had like a weird relationship with those things because he's adorable. As an autistic person, I felt kind of uncomfortable with all the changeling scenes, but I won't go into detail in this video at least because I realized the show wasn't directly created for me. Compromise? But, I did think, and I'm sorry because I realize this isn't fair, but I thought Jonathan was being so illogical when he was watching his brother being tortured to death. Like, if they didn't get the thing to leave Will, then Will was going to die anyway, so they might as well try as hard as they can. I felt that I didn't really understand why Will was basically okay at the end when it seemed like he got a lot of brain damage. Like, it seemed like it wasn't like a supernatural thing, like he was just possessed. Like, I thought it was actually causing him a lot of brain damage. Whatever. Josh said, and I agree, like, the plot didn't particularly whatever. It wasn't much of anything, but he said that he thought he would miss the characters like they were real people, and I agree with that. I feel like the main appeal of the show is like that they're such good characters, like especially the child characters are like such well written and well acted characters that it just like, you know, makes the show so good no matter what the show is like. Like, if the next year, because this year I feel like, you know, in the first season they had good genre elements. In this season I feel like they totally rehashed it. So I think next season they can totally just go like, oh, there's an evil river with demo fish. And, like, that's what's coming for everybody now. I think the last shot was like a giant monster hovering. It was that monster that was possessing Will, and it was hovering over the school. Right? I feel like, you know, it was another one of those things where I was like, okay, I know this is supposed to be a really scary shot, and it's showing me something scary, but it's so dark, I can't make out what's going on. And, I'm done watching the show, so I give up. Anyway, if it is about to attack the school at the prom, I guess it is good that they let Eleven go to the prom, because she can help with that. I guess, sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, you know, they can rehash whatever. I'm happy to see the characters again and have it be like a, you know, just put in the sci-fi horror setting that we need to watch our characters doing the stuff that we enjoy seeing them do, because I could watch them read the really hashed out bad sci-fi phone book. Not the best analogy of my life. I wrote, every breath you take is an appropriate song given what a stalker 11 is, that she followed Mike around and caused a girl to be injured just because she was talking to Mike. I'm not really sure what to make of, like, Max's relationship with her brother and how that was evolved. I mean, I'm not saying it's a flaw. It's just tonally confusing to me, because it's like, on the one hand, I feel like it's sort of treated as if it's like a typical sibling rivalry thing, like the way Max talks about it, and then the way it's resolved by her basically, like, tranquilizing him. I love the scene afterwards when Steve is all doped up with the kids in the car, by the way. So cute. I love Dustin being like, it's okay, buddy. I feel like Steve is like his new demo dog. But, yeah, I feel like it's resolved by Max basically standing up to her brother, making it seem like a typical sibling rivalry story, yet the way that he treated her was, like, so threatening and scary that, like, it almost seems like it's not really appropriate for, the way things seemed. But, you know, at the same time, I guess there's so many different ways that people can, like, bully each other and, like, have interpersonal violence, and, you know, I think it's true that, like, things that you would describe as just, like, bullying, maybe because they're between peers or between siblings, can be, like, just as bad and damaging as, like, more stereotypical abuse or whatever. So, I don't know. I'm not saying it's a flaw. I'm just like, that's interesting. I wonder, like, what I'm supposed to take away from that whole storyline. Sorry, nearly done. I just think I had one more thing. Oh, yeah, so the whole Barb thing, was that, like, just put in the show because, like, fans had a problem with the way Barb was treated in the first season? I'm not sure if that's, like, you know, I'm not sure if I'm being wrong. I think a lot of the time fans think that, like, you know, creators are much more interested in what we think than they really are, and that even when they say they're interested, they're kind of just paying lip service. I mean, at least when it comes to the things that, like, super fans want from a show. But, it did sort of come off to me as if it was shoehorned in. Like, I feel like the whole season would have been exactly the same if that whole storyline didn't happen. And I said several episodes ago, I think, which was the last time that we saw the bearded man when he was busy fangirling Nancy and Jonathan's relationship. I was like, oh, isn't this going to blow up in their faces? Like they're trying to push a fake story about what happened to Barb so they can basically get an emotionally satisfying response, but people will still believe the story. I was like, is this really going to work? And then it wasn't mentioned for several episodes, and they were like, it worked. I wasn't sure what to make of that. So it felt shoehorned into me. Anyway, I think that's about all I have to say. I'm sorry this is not a great ending. I had to skip like a day or two of watching and recording, so I think I kind of lost the thread of the show. I have enjoyed doing this type of review, though, and I've never done it before, so if you enjoy watching this type of review, you can tell me, and you could request other shows for me to review this way, if you would like. Because I usually watch shows while doing other things, I'm probably not going to watch something that has subtitles. That's my only stipulation, I guess. But otherwise, I would be happy to do more videos like this if anyone's interested. I could come up with a really smart conclusion about the show to make this all seem like it was worthwhile, but I think that would be a lie. I have to, probably give myself more time to think about it. It was definitely relentlessly entertaining. I really love this show, and I'm sorry if this is an impure thing to say, but I would be really happy if they ran it into the ground.